We start back in Central Africa, where the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, has requested for the immediate evacuation of a UN peacekeeping operation that has been in the country for nearly 25 years. Tshisekedi said it is time for his country to take full control of its destiny and become the main actor in its own stability. For years, the MONUSCO mission's final departure has been at the center of debates over the DRC's future, as well as a source of tension and populist rhetoric in the Central African nation. According to Tshisekedi, the mission of 15,000 peacekeepers has not succeeded in confronting rebellions and armed conflicts, nor in protecting civilian populations. Meanwhile, the United States warned at a Security Council meeting in June against a hasty withdrawal of the mission, asserting that the country was not ready to part with the blue helmets at the end of 2023. Joining me now is Martin Ewe. He's the technical coordinator ENACT project at the ISS. Martin, welcome to the news. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you and to your viewers.
I want us to start with looking at the possible reasons behind the president's statement about removing UN peacekeepers from the DRC. As I said earlier, it's a source of tension. It's a continued ongoing debate. But in particular, we're seeing this rhetoric sort of gain more momentum. Can we attribute the statement to any specific geopolitical factors or even power dynamics that are happening in the region?
Yes, there are some factors. The principal one is really the fact that elections are coming up. And this has been one tenuous issue that has been lingering around since it was first raised, I think, 3 years ago. And then you will recall that last year we had so many people died in protests against the UN peacekeepers. So this issue has been around, and there has been indeed a program for the UN peacekeepers to leave. That was a step-by-step kind of process that was agreed. But what is surprising now, or what is new now with this request from President Tshisekedi, is that he has shortened the timelines. The UN was supposed to start withdrawal as of 2024, but now he has asked them to withdraw by the end of the year. And this is purely because I think Tshisekedi wants to show the Congolese people that he is doing exactly what they want him to do. He is asking the UN, or he has requested the UN to leave. He's been able to succeed in that. That could be a big plus for him in the elections, because that was one of his pledges, during the last campaign that he did. So for me, this is the key factor. It's the fact that elections are coming up. This has been a very tense issue that Congolese have lost faith in the UN peacekeepers. They believe that the UN peacekeepers have failed to achieve the objective that they set out in the DRC for the past 25 years.
Okay, so let me
I don't think it has been a complete loss. I think that the peacekeepers, to some extent, have been able to stabilize the situation. Yes, you still have rebel movement popping up here and there, but the situation is not exactly what it was in 1999 when they were sent into the DRC.
So, Martin, you've actually answered my next question, which was really in terms of affecting the security. But beyond that, what about this decision and how it affects the relationship between the DRC and other countries, particularly those involved in peacekeeping efforts in the region? We also know that the activities of these armed groups, militants, rebels, civilian militias, whatever you may call them, are not restricted to the DRC. That in itself has caused political turmoil with the DRC's neighbors. So how are the neighbors likely to take this decision? Does it work for them, for UN peacekeepers to leave the DRC?
Look, to some extent, remember, it's not just the UN peacekeeping mission that has been affected by Tshisekedi's call. Remember that the East African forces deployed under the East African Community, which is also there in the DRC since earlier this year. But because the forces have failed to do what Tshisekedi believes It's the basic thing for such a force to do. And same thing with the UN, the fact that they have failed to go after rebel movement, the fact that they failed to go after terrorist groups. For Tshisekedi, this is non-negotiable. This is something that you cannot negotiate with. When the East African forces were deployed, the key issue at the time was the M23. And therefore, it was expected that when the East African forces will be on the ground, they will help the DRC to, to fight the M23 and to be able to send the M23 out. But that has not happened much since the East African forces have been deployed. So you have, on the one hand, the UN peacekeepers being asked to leave. You have, on the other hand, the East African forces being asked to leave. But it's not leaving a vacuum. Remember, Tshisekedi has also requested SADC, the Southern African Development Community, to deploy, meaning this SADC is going to fill the vacuum that is going to be left by the UN peacekeepers or even by the East African community. And also, it is not just SADC alone. He has also negotiated with neighboring countries, some of which are deploying. Kenya, for example, have forces there on bilateral level, or one would say on two levels. One is the East African community level, and one is also on the bilateral level, meaning if the East African community is going to leave, the Kenyan forces do not necessarily have to leave. They could stay on the bilateral arrangement. So this is what is happening. We are not particularly sure that the arrangement in place can replace the UN peacekeepers. Remember, there were more than 15,000 of them, and what is being arranged now does not come anything close
Martin,
to that.
let me
meaning
ask
that
about
there's
that.
certainly going to be a gap.
Yes, let me ask about that as we wrap up. So as you said, about 15,000 peacekeepers, the president's accusing them of not being able to stop the rebellions or the armed conflicts or protect civilian populations. But at the UN Security Council, the U.S. warned about hasty decisions and said that the country was not, in fact, ready to part with the blue helmets. Let's wrap up on that point. Is the DRC really ready, even with all of this in place, whether it's from the EAC or the SADC as well? Is that enough to really step into a gap that may be created? It may not be as large as the 15,000 member force, but there will be a gap. Is the country ready to find a way to address that gap? Very quickly.
For me, I don't think the question is whether, with the departure of the UN peacekeeping forces, there's going to be peace overnight in the DRC. The question is whether is the situation going to deteriorate worse than it is now. And in my view, I think the circumstances on the ground could actually call for that, because we know that the rebel groups in the DRC, they take their opportunities, and they could take opportunity from the gap or the vacuum that is going to be left by the UN peacekeepers. But I'm still watching to see which other bilateral arrangement is the DRC going to make in order to fill the gap. But everyone is so fearful of what is going to happen when the UN peacekeepers are out of the DRC without any replacement forces on the ground, because of what we know about the rebel groups in the DRC.
All right, so this makes it a situation that we need to keep a very close eye on, with the DRC particularly, and of course in the region, Central and East Africa. Martin, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.